For historical context and more information, see the description below.
There are far too many human beings who have a great propensity to imitate, and we're living in a day when their breed is all about us. They have a tendency to conformity and to sheep-mindedness, not only in the young people who claim to be something different in this day, and yet they are so alike in their hairdos and in their dress and so on. People don't seem to want to appear odd. They don't want to appear different. They want to do what the crowd is doing. Witness the discomfiture of a man who goes to a formal gathering and is just in a business suit. Or witness the look of discomfiture on a woman who goes to a party and discovers that her dress is just a couple of inches longer than the other women who are at the party. It doesn't stop with clothes, of course. There are those whose gifts to the church are measured by what they think their neighbors are giving rather than by what God has given to them. There are those whose activities in the church are controlled by what they see others do. They don't want to feel that they are doing too much. There are those in society who will deal in questionable pleasures because their friends are doing it. There are those who furnish their homes in a certain way because in this particular period people are buying furniture of a certain type. And when all of these folk are challenged, they frequently come back with the remark, everybody's doing it. It is the excuse of the politician whose crookedness has been discovered. It is the excuse of the working man who has done shoddy work. It's the excuse of the businessman whose tricks have been discovered. It's the excuse of the churchgoer whose hypocrisy has come to the forefront. Now, this isn't a new sin by any means. It certainly is as old as the genesis of man, and even beyond, because some animals, especially monkeys, are great imitators. But I'm only going back as far as that book of Exodus for a text. We find things happening to the people of Israel that had them greatly stirred. They'd been bearing up under tremendous burdens, and they were saying in effect that living under Pharaoh was really a very simple and an easy thing compared with what they had to put up with in the desert. You can hear something of the way comments got started. Someone would make that kind of remark, and before he knew it, hundreds of people would have joined in the chorus. Someone would say that we're not sure that our God is as strong as the God of these people with whom we're moving, and very soon a group took up the chorus. And some said, why don't we build idols? Why worship this God that you preach about, Moses? And we find Moses in that 23rd chapter of Exodus saying, thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. In effect, stand up for what you believe to be right, regardless of what the crowd is doing. We need to hear something of that in this day, because there's a kind of unconscious level of the thinking of people in this day that's dangerous. Of course, it's noteworthy that the command is not that we should keep from following a good example. The Scripture time and time again tells us that we should do this, that we should be followers of those who are worthy of being followed. We're told in one place that we should be followers of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. And there are some things that are done by the multitude that are so worthy of being practiced. And we need to know it. And certainly a considerable group of our young people need to know it. There is a current play called Plaza Suite. Probably have seen it. As a matter of fact, this is a play in 3 parts that are so distinctive that it could really be known as 3 short plays. The last one opens with a wealthy father and mother having made preparation for the wedding of their daughter. But the daughter was refusing to show. All decked out in her wedding attire, she locked herself in the bathroom and she refused to come out. And her parents were unable to decipher just why in the world she was doing this. What had they done wrong that their daughter should so behave? Finally, she gave the answer. She suddenly realized that her wedding would be the first move toward being like her parents, and she couldn't bear the thought of it. Kind of dramatic way of speaking of the generation gap, I suppose, a kind of dramatic way of saying that the young people today don't idolize their parents if they ever did. It's a way of saying that these young people see another light. They're listening to another drummer. And they'd rather take their chances on coming out at the wrong road than come out on the road that their parents think is the right one. And so she didn't want to get married. The thing we've got to remember, of course, is that there's so much good in this world. There's so many good people. There's so many good parents. There's so many good grandparents. And it's going to be a tragedy if this generation grows up missing them. Dr. A.J. Musty used to speak at Union Seminary when I was a student there. He would occasionally come over and lead a forum. He was the head of the Fellowship of Reconciliation before he died, just last year. I know one man who heard him speak when he was 75 years of age. That is, when Dr. Musty was 75. And he said that this man changed the course of his life. Because in a world of smooth compromise, he stood out as a man of absolute principle. He was, he said, a man against whom I could measure myself. That's a high compliment. One said of Rufus Jones, the famous Quaker, to meet him was to feel set up for the rest of the day, because he always made one confident that the best was yet to come. There are still many people like that. Still many parents like that. It's a tragedy if any of us miss them in the pessimism of this day, because they're there. But when the multitude is doing wrong, this is what Moses was talking about. When a multitude's doing evil, then a person has got to go off on his own course. The New Testament is very specific about this distinction. Paul, in different places, says almost, when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. What he was really saying was, for courtesy's sake, dress as do the Romans within reason. Eat at their tables as they eat. Take these standards of social things as they do. But there never was a sturdier, more uncompromising individual in the world than when something came up and spoke to the soul of Paul, and he had to make a decision as to the rightness or the wrongness of that thing. Not even the 400 of Rome thrown in could change his opinion then. If it touched the destiny of his soul, then following the multitude stopped. The fact is, you see, that even though we believe in the rule of majority in government, the rule of the majority is not final when we're in the realm of morals. When we're in the realm of spiritual things, in that area we must be independent, and we must follow the dictation, we must follow the guidance of our own consciences before God. The world's life has always depended on that kind of person. And I say we worry about this today in America because of this leveling off process. Are we going to push to the forefront those young people, those older people, that see this distinction, that see the distinction between following a majority in politics or a political party, and even there are times when the moral part becomes so strong that one has to stand out by himself. What a tremendous procession of these people there were. John Wesley, when he took on his shoulders the matter of defying one of the beloved bishops of those days and went out and preached to the miners in the fields of England. Elizabeth Fry, who was opposed by the influential British clergy, how often in history the clergy have been sinners. This woman preaching against all of the things that were happening in the English prisons of that day and standing up at times by herself. Jane Addams in Chicago, with so much of the power of the social community against her, working for her Hull House. Jesus Christ, in spite of the fact that away off in the distance he saw that the cross was inevitable, that he couldn't get away from it, still kept that course and never tried to avoid it. When it comes to the command of man as against the command of God, there's only one course for one to take. There is an area in living where what the multitude is thinking just doesn't matter. One's ultimate answer is before God. Oh, one pays a price for it. He pays a tremendous price for it. Lord Moran wrote the biography of Winston Churchill. In one place, he said of the great man, he knew more than most what happens to a man who is different from the crowd, the penalty that is exacted from those who do not conform. In the years before the war, he had come to realize that he had no real friends in any of the three parties. He could not remember a time when he was sure of his own reception in the country, and he felt his isolation. Winston Churchill. All of us feel that kind of isolation when we dare to step off. And yet what happens if one doesn't is deadly. He retains the appearance of a man, but he has given away that thing that makes him distinctive as a man before God. Look back on that statement that was made in High Conquest by James Ullman. When he was asked why men climb mountains, he didn't give the simple statement, because it's there. He went deeper than that. Why should men deliberately turn their backs on their hard-won security in their usual lives to face storm and cold, hardships and danger, even death itself? It's not material gain, nor is it fame. Why climb? A man climbs because he needs to climb, because that's the way he's made. The key to the mountaineering spirit lies not in what men do, but in what they are, in the raising of their voices and in the lifting of their hearts. End of quote. Something happens to all that, you see, when one goes into the living of a life of quiet subordination. A butchery of those two words, I ought. Surely the central responsibility of life is to make something of oneself in the last sense, and what a small percentage of people ever do it. What a small percentage of people ever amount to anything real in the world. Some years ago at a eugenic conference in New York City, it was stated that there were some 30 billion people that had grown to maturity since the world began for man some 10,000 years ago. The number, of course, would be much higher now. But at that time, it was pointed out by the professors and by the authorities there that of the 30 billion people who had reached maturity, only 5,000 had ever really been significant in their living. That's a pretty small percentage. The ones who did reach to those heights were the people, though, that have helped produce the great ideas, helped to develop the best things this world knows. We are living in a time when too many, then, are leveling down. Maybe we need to hear what Lyman Beecher heard one Sunday morning when he was going to preach a sermon at the church of a friend. They met on the road. They stopped to speak to each other, and this clergyman friend said, "Lyman, do you realize that before we were born, the Lord willed that on this day you should preach in my pulpit and I should preach in yours?" Lyman Beecher says, "Is that so? Then I won't do it. I won't do it." He wasn't defying God. Lyman Beecher was simply saying that he didn't believe that men are puppets on the end of a string and God makes them dance from one place to the other. Lyman Beecher was saying that he believed that in this world of our Father, there is an independence before God, and that there is a freedom, and that we have choices that we must make, and that there are times when we must stand up and say, "Is that so?" And I won't do it. There are words of encouragement here. We say everybody's doing it. The fact is, everybody isn't doing it. It just isn't true. Can't you hear when Moses came down from the mount? people talking to him and saying, "Don't scold us, Moses. Look at that person and that person and that person. They're higher up in this little body than we are, and look what they're doing. Everybody's doing it. Why blame us?" And can't you hear Moses say, "Look just a little closer at that crowd. Look at that person and that person and that person. I can outnumber your group anytime." And they're not doing it. In the newspapers and the television and every other media, they talk about these terrible things that happen in the world as if they were the generally accepted standard for living. We've heard a good deal the last couple of days about television newscasters slanting the news. If we ever get to the place where either a newscaster or a politician doesn't slant the news, that will be the day. And I'm not sure that I want to live in it. I'm not sure that I want to live in the day where people in this country are afraid to get up and say what they think and put whatever slant they like on it and then depend on the American people to do the sifting. But I think a much more serious problem is what's given to us at news. Just let a thing be sordid or vicious enough, and it's bound to make every newscast in the country. We get a running account of the men on our side who were killed in Vietnam, running account of those that were killed by the other side, just as if it were from the sport page and we were getting a report on a turkey shoot. There just must be some deeds of mercy happening over there. There must be some things in Vietnam where human beings are acting towards human beings as if they didn't enjoy killing. We never hear about it. There is good in this world, plenty of it, even in Vietnam, and we need to do more talking and we need to do more thinking about what I believe constitutes that great majority, those people who still believe that the right kind of morals is important business, that honesty and integrity are still priceless commodities, that there is no substitute for truth, that we are our brother's keeper, and before God one's own life counts for something, and before God he has a responsibility for that life. Take a good look around you. Look at some of the people in this church. Look at some of the people in this community that are reaching out and holding high their flag of concern about people. And they're doing good things. Maybe it's good that this doesn't appear on the front pages of newspapers. Maybe that's saying that the evil thing is still the news and that the good is the accepted. But now and then we'd like to be supported a bit, wouldn't we? I read the other day in one of Dr. Fosdick's books a letter written by a boy to his father after this boy had returned to the service. The father had been an alcoholic when the boy left in the first place. But in the meantime, this father had met God and the miracle happened. And when the boy returned, he wrote to his father saying, "Pop, it seems like something from a fairy tale. I'm so proud of you that it's better than being Abraham Lincoln's son or even Uncle Sam's. They did wonderful things for other people too, but you have climbed the biggest barrier in humanity. You've conquered yourself. I'll never be able to put into words how much I love you for what you have done for Mom and for me and for the kids. That happens in this world. It does. We don't hear about it very often because it's one of those things for which there's no fanfare. It just comes. But when we're tempted to follow a multitude to do evil, let us not forget that by the grace of God, there's still a multitude of people out there who by their moral example and who by their integrity and their honesty, by their concern, are making their sons proud of them. And they're more important than the rest. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
This morning's worship service emanated from Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh. Ministers of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James R. Spear, and the Reverend J. Wayne Hanratty. Organist and choir director, Russell G. Whitman. Today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was titled, On the Imitation of Others. Your comments on these services are invited. Listen next Sunday at 11 o'clock for the regular worship service from Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.